So I think at this point in Dragonflight, it's fairly safe to say that the crafting order system is a failure. At least on my realm, I can now barely find any crafting orders to do, and that's having already spec'd quite a bit into certain BOP items, right? Which I'm not really able to fulfill unless I actually reach out to other players and advertise my services and so forth. However, all is not lost as I am still making decent amounts of gold through other means, which I am going to share in today's video. And as most of these methods don't actually require too much of a professional knowledge investment, even if you've already spent points into crafting BOPs, it shouldn't matter too much. Plus, it'll be pretty easy to set any of this stuff up on your alts as well, especially given how alt-friendly, for the most part at least, Dragonflight has been. So with that, jumping right into things, the very first method I want to highlight is crafting and selling buy on equip blue gear. Now these are generally super easy to set up as you don't usually need that much skill to be able to guarantee the maximum quality at item level 343. And although nowadays with the endgame systems being underway, people aren't necessarily needing these pieces of gear as much as before, but at least as with the recording of this video, I'm still selling quite a few of these pieces every day. So namely some of the plate gear, which includes armor and weapons. There are a lot of weapons that come from blacksmithing, and I also sell leather and mail gear from my leatherworker, as well as a few offhands and staves from my scribe. And so there are definitely also opportunities outside of the main gear crafting professions, being blacksmithing, leatherworking, and tailoring, that have some of these buy on equip pieces of gear that you can also use to supplement your income. And again, these are generally very easy to set up at maximum quality, as you usually just need to level up your profession using any power leveling guide. I usually refer to wowheads to the maximum level or close to the maximum level that you can attain through profession recipes, and that should usually suffice to allow you to craft the maximum quality, which means you don't actually have to spend any profession knowledge points to boost up these pieces of gear if you want to focus specifically on that. And if you wanted to, you can even put some of those points into, say, resourcefulness, because you don't need additional quality, right? You can instead boost up your resourcefulness from your profession tree to get materials back to be able to increase your profit margins. And now speaking of profit margins, not every single piece will be profitable every day, especially the ones that people are using to level up their professions. Those are usually more abundant, and thus people are flooding the markets with those, usually at least. And so you want to definitely use add-ons like Auctionator. That's a very useful one for you to be able to determine right on your crafting window whether or not a craft is profitable based on the current prices. And with that, on to method number 2. For actually another category of buy on equip gear, we have Crimson Combatants PvP green gear. Now, to be able to craft and sell these, you'll have to first of all pick up the recipes from either the auction house or from doing PvP, and the skill requirements for maxing out the quality of these will be actually higher than the aforementioned blue gear, meaning that you'll likely have to either have a decently high skill of that profession, and or you can also spec into the respective armor pieces to boost up the skill level of the pieces you want to focus on. Personally, especially for blacksmithing, leatherworking, and tailoring, the armor crafting professions, I think the optimal strategy is to spec very slightly into each armor piece and sort of spread out your points just enough so that you can craft the maximum quality using decent quality reagents as well, right? So keep in mind that using higher ranking reagents will allow you to craft higher ranking items as well, right? And they actually contribute a huge part, meaning that you might not need that many skill points in the first place. And you can also just boost them up later on after acquiring the breadth, so to speak, right? Being able to craft multiple types of pieces at a decent enough skill level, and then just go slowly skill all of them up at the same time to not have to use as high of quality reagents later on. And to my point here, what I'm demonstrating in this clip is shopping for the high enough quality reagents to be able to craft rank 5 of these Crimson Combatants trinkets, right? These are PvP trinkets. And so aside from your traditional, again, armor crafting professions, blacksmithing, leatherworking, and tailoring, which each has their own broad repertoire of Crimson Combatants recipes, inscription and jewel crafting are also sort of really good options actually, albeit they don't have as many recipes available as the other armor crafting professions, but the items that they can craft are namely ones that cannot be obtained in the slots, at least, from collecting the World PvP bloody tokens. So there's like a new way to get PvP gear from World PvP where you get these like war crates, right? And those tokens that drop from the crates you can actually redeem for PvP gear, and those actually have a higher item level than the Crimson Combatants gear. However, trinkets and jewelry, which includes again necklaces and rings, are not redeemable from those tokens, right? And thus cannot be just traded in from doing these world PvP events. And hence there's definitely a higher demand for these items. And thus I highly recommend, if you have a jewel crafter or scribe or both, ideally, that you pick up these recipes. And for example, on my jewel crafter here, I can craft both the amulet and the rings. Although the profit margins, as you can see, are not that high at a few hundred gold, it can vary depending on the day as well. However, I'm able to sell multiple per day. That's how much the demand is generally. So I generally craft a whole batch every single time I log in, which can be more than once a day, right? If I'm going to be logging in on this character to craft these, I'll generally do this 2 or 3 times a day, and I can usually sell them out in just a few hours by the time I log in the next time. And the jewelry pieces do again also come from the auction house and from PvP, so you can usually buy them out from the auction house for pretty cheap. But the inscription ones are a bit different. You actually pick them up from this PvP vendor right here in Valdraken, and you have to trade in 3 awakened ires for each recipe. Of course, it's well worth it, at least on my server, for their prices. You can't sell the recipes themselves, but obviously the trinkets that you craft are going to be really profitable right now, at least, because again, people don't actually know about these trinkets very well. They're not redeemable, or a similar version isn't redeemable with the bloody tokens. People have to either get honor points to be able to get similarly powered, trinkets, or they can just buy these from the auction house, right? Which are actually a new thing as well, which I believe were added with the previous weekly reset, which was, as of this video, about a week ago. And because of this, not many crafters even know about this just yet. So if you can, definitely get on this quickly, because the profit margins are pretty ridiculous. Alright, and with that, on to method number 3, and also speeding up just a bit, we have BOE profession gear, which actually is craftable by many different professions, including engineering, blacksmithing, some of the ones that you don't even expect, like jewel crafting can craft quite a few, and of course leatherworking can cover quite a few bases as well. And these are generally pretty easy to 5-star at maximum quality. Usually, not always, but usually you can achieve 5-star on these BOEs by just leveling up your professions through the trainer learn recipes. And again, usually the most efficient way to level up is through the power leveling guides on Wowhead. Now there are certain recipes that you may not be as easily able to 5-star just from leveling up through the trainer recipes, but you can usually supplement and push through to rank 5 by just buying up and using higher ranking ingredients or reagents rather, as I'm doing here by shopping through the auction house for higher ranked leather materials, and just using barely enough to almost guarantee a 5-star. And by the way, for a bit of a pro tip, what the game likes to do by default is prioritize using all of your highest ranking reagents, regardless of how far you've already pushed above the maximum quality, right? Even if you already guarantee a certain quality, even if it's the maximum, it'll still try to use all of your highest ranking reagents, at least from what I've seen. And so what you want to do if you want to save a bit of gold is that you can select how many lower ranking versus higher ranking reagents you want to use, and just use the minimum number of high ranking reagents. And for another very important point, and I may not have mentioned this too clearly earlier, so I apologize for that, but quality is king, right, for crafting, which means you generally want to hit the maximum quality if you can. Sometimes, occasionally, the non-max quality items will still sell for a decent profit margin, but generally speaking, for a lot of the especially lower tier like green items, BOEs, the only ones that are profitable are the highest ranking items. So you definitely want to be able to at least guarantee that, which again is usually attainable by just leveling up your profession through trainer recipes and not really have to invest too many points, if any, at all, into the profession trees. But for the ones that do require a bit higher skill, you can consider either investing a few points here and there. There's also a generalist tree where you can level up your entire profession's skill for any craft, and or you can also opt to use more higher ranking reagents to guarantee that higher level quality. Alright, and on to method number 4, and this is definitely a lot of players' bread and butter, and that is crafting and selling commodities, such as, and I think most significantly, gems, enchants, reagents, especially in Dragonflight, and things like potions and files, although I don't quite like alchemy as much as before. But anyhow, for these to be viable though, you'll generally again want to get to the maximum quality, which in this case for commodities is rank 3 as opposed to rank 5 for gear. Now as you can see here, I am sort of pivoting on my jewel crafter. Originally I spec'd into necklaces, but because again with the disaster of what the crafting order system is, speccing that way hasn't really turned out too well, and so I'm pivoting into crafting gems instead. As you can see here, I've maxed out fire gems, and I also am putting points into the center node for additional skill points. And generally what you want to do for reaching rank 3 with commodities is to not only put as many plus skill as you can into the specific nodes for that specific type of commodity you're crafting, and also generally into the generalist node, right? Which will give you plus skills to everything in that profession, which will also help you get that overall skill level or specific skill level for that craft higher to match the recipe difficulty for rank 3. And so for example, once I've maxed out fire gems and then maxed out the middle node for faceting, which is focusing on gems, I can then go over to Jeweler's Toolset Mastery, as you can see on the top left tab, which is the generalist tree, where I can put additional points for any additional skill points that I might need. And as of now, I'm currently not quite there yet to rank 3 with my fire gems, even if I use the highest quality reagents, and if I use the illustrious insight, which by the way are reagents or finishing reagents you can convert from artisan's metal to further boost your skill. These come at a limited quality, but it's important to unlock these on your tree to be able to use them to get that skill boost. But anyhow, I'm getting somewhat close with some of my fire gems, so all I need to do is to continue pumping points into my gem tree. And also if I want to eventually use say lower quality reagents, if they're even cheaper, I can then put even more points into the generalist tree to further increase my skill points to essentially guarantee rank 3s without having to use the best reagents. And for another quick example, enchanting has also been another way that players have been able to make a lot of gold. But for enchanting, generally, at least right now, with the number of points that are largely available, skill points that is, it isn't really possible to guarantee rank 3 for some of the best enchants. And so what you want to do instead is an inspiration focused build, or wherever you proc an inspiration proc, if you max out the inspiration tree in your, in this case it's runes, rods, and ruses, which is the name of that tree. And in that tab or tree, there will be one specific node where you'll be able to boost not only your chance to get inspiration procs, but also the amount of skill you gain when you get an inspiration proc, right? So on your gear, you definitely want to prioritize the inspiration stat. And by maxing out this tree here, you'll be able to gain a lot of skill just by having a proc, which will usually make it worth it, even if say you craft some rank 2s if you don't proc, which will make you lose a bit of gold on those. But when you do proc it, the amount of profit that you make from that will more than compensate for the amount of gold you lose from the lower ranks that you craft. And now last but not least, on to method 5 for crafting to make gold, we have shuffling, which is actually also doable somewhat semi-AFK if that's your thing. And besides the old enchanting shuffles, which should still somewhat work, where you create the cheapest gear like blue gear possible and then disenchant, there are some new ways to shuffle in Dragonflight if you spec in the profession trees in specific ways. The first example I want to show is with Dark Moon cards with inscription. I happen to be spec'd into somewhat at least Dark Moon cards on my scribe, so I'm able to do this. And the way this works is by speccing deep enough into a certain type of Dark Moon card, or you can even do multiple if you want for more options, you can actually disenchant or sort of break apart Dark Moon cards for rousing elements, which again are very useful and used in many different types of crafts. And so what you would do is sort of calculate, put into a spreadsheet. I'll link a very helpful one below, a spreadsheet done by Penguin Art Together. She has a great YouTube channel all about gold making. You can check out, I highly recommend it. And I'll link her spreadsheet and video on this topic as well down below. So I gotta give her credit for this. But anyway, you can use her spreadsheet to determine whether or not a shuffle like this will be profitable. So for example, here I'm buying up some 8 of fires. These are the cheapest fire element dark moon cards that I could find, and then let's see what I get when I break them apart. Based on the spreadsheet, this is just an experiment, but based on the spreadsheet, I've done the numbers. This should not be profitable, at least at this moment, because prices can fluctuate, and fire happens to be the lowest price or one of the lowest price rousing elements right now, at least. By disenchanting these fire dark moon cards, I get like 3 to 5 rousing fires, and currently if I do this, it's a slight loss, so it would not be good for me to do this. But if it is profitable at any time, I can potentially buy up, say, hundreds of dark moon cards and just sort of semi AFK and click away and just keep disenchanting and just make gold that way, right? And besides inscription, another somewhat similar way to make gold is with tailoring, where you would spec into textiles here and into spinning, preferably max it out so that you'll be able to extract, again, these rousing elements of different types from different types of cloth, right? So what you would do is to input the costs or the value of these types of cloth bolts of different elements, as well as of the rousing elements themselves, to determine whether or not that particular element is profitable for you to do. And if it is, you can really just AFK away or semi AFK away, unraveling hundreds of cloth at once potentially, and just maybe doing something else in the meantime, right? Like watching some YouTube videos. And that's pretty much all for today's video about how to make gold with crafting without doing crafting orders. Now I do hold out hope that the crafting order system will be updated. For example, if there'll be more frequent drops of that epic BOP Titan Spark or whatever it's called, which is a limiting factor in how many BOPs people can request. And I just hope the system itself gets improved over time, because it is really new. So it also helps that, you know, some of my profession knowledge points won't completely go to waste if that happens. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let me know if I missed anything, or if you have any questions, I'll definitely reply to your comments. And thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next video. Peace.